The Washington Commanders have finally made their pick for defensive coordinator in choosing Deronte Jones. Now you might be asking, who is Deronte Jones and what does this mean for the Commanders? Well, stick with me and we'll get all into it. So, who is Deronte Jones? That's a question that most Commanders fans, heck, even the whole NFL is probably asking right now. So let me tell you, Deronte Jones was actually born in the DMV area in Capitol Heights, Maryland, and attended Bishop McNamara High School. And if you don't know about them, it's a private school that sends a lot of good talent to Division I schools and even a couple NFL teams like Spencer Anderson, the O-lineman, or Brandon Coleman, who actually played for the Saints back in the 2010s. So looking at his resume, Daronte has coached at high school, D1, now in the NFL. What does that tell me? That tells me he's a hard worker and he loves football. You have to have a lot of respect for him and his climb up because you know he's had to put a lot of work in to get to where he is now. But looking at his resume, mostly he's been on that defensive side. He hasn't really coached on offense at all, which isn't crazy. It's pretty normal. You pick one side of the ball to be your specialty and focus on that. So he's been a defensive backs coach for a very long time, since 2016 and from further on. And even now, he was with the Minnesota Vikings for the past 3 seasons under Brian Flores. Now, to be under Brian Flores, I think you got to be made of some type of steel. You know, we've seen that Brian Flores has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I've seen a lot of people talk pretty bad junk about him. Of course, we even talked about earlier Tua Tagovailoa, who they weren't the best meshed together, and we see where that led to. But for Daronte to be in his staff for 3 years, that tells me he has very good nerves. He's able to take criticism, and he has the defensive mindset, because I don't think Brian Flores will let anybody on that staff without that. And when I say defensive mindset, I don't mean schemes. I'm talking about that smash mouth football and a guy who's not afraid to get his hands dirty at all times. And we see that within the schemes, actually, of Brian Flores. Brian Flores blitzes more than anybody in the league, and it's not even close. Whether it's safeties, cornerbacks, not just linebackers, he'll send the whole package after you. And that's something that I'm expecting from Daronte. I'm expecting to send a whole bunch of exotic blitzes, different looks, and really try to make the quarterback and the offensive line uncomfortable with all the different ways he's going to get after you. Now, looking at the Vikings defense this year, they were really good against the pass, ranking 2nd in the league, only giving up an average of 158 yards per game, and 3rd in total defense. Now, of course, Brian Flores is the DC, but Daronte is the DB's coach, and a lot of those yards comes from the passing game, especially in this league. And along with being the DB's coach, he's also the defensive passing game coordinator, which also plays a huge role in the schemes and all the different plays and looks that they'll be giving the quarterbacks throughout the entire game. But what did shock me was, with all that blitzing and the philosophy of Brian Flores and the staff under him, they only had 8 interceptions the entire year. Now, that leads towards the bottom. And Brian Flores has been better when it comes to interceptions, so this definitely was a down year, but it did shock me. And speaking of that Brian Flores philosophy, getting the ball, getting turnovers, Daronte really embodies that, especially in this interview he did last year where he said, and I quote, "You don't get paid if you don't touch the ball." Very, very simple words, but it resonates a lot. You don't get paid unless you touch the ball. Big plays are what changes the games. There's always 2 to 3 plays within a game that really shift the momentum and decide who wins. And a lot of times it's those turnovers, especially in the key parts of the game. And that really resonates with what I see with Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn's always been a defensive-minded guy that wants to get his hands on the ball. Think back to his defensive coordinator years with the Seahawks, LOB. Need I say more? And then you go to the Cowboys. He made that Cowboys defense when he was there look like ball hawks. We see what Trayvon Diggs has been looking like now, and it isn't what he was then. He was leading the league in interceptions, and teams were afraid to throw his way. Dan Quinn did that. Dan Quinn loves to get turnovers, and I think that is a huge reason why he brought in Deronte Jones. Now, what does this mean for the Commanders? And more specifically, Dan Quinn. Because Dan Quinn and the Commanders are coming off an abysmal 4-13 year with high expectations that were not even close to being met. And usually when something like that happens, you want to bring in experience. You want to bring in guys that have turned things around and fought the ships when the water was at its highest. But that's not what Dan Quinn has done. Dan Quinn has gotten a first-time defensive coordinator in the NFL and even first-time offensive coordinator in the NFL with David Blau. And what that says to me is he's putting all the chips on the table and he's riding with these young guys. He sees something in them that no one else does. So it means a ton to this team, and Dan Quinn he's laying it all out there. So we'll see what happens. Now tell me, what do you think about this hiring? Are you a fan? Do you hate it? Do you like it? In the middle? Don't really know? Let me know and we can discuss it more. And I'll see you next time.